Hi everyone, this is Ron with Neo, and today we have here the OPPO Reno4 Pro. OPPO makes some of my favorite phones. Recently I reviewed the Oppo Find X2 Pro earlier in the year, and I really love that phone. Just about everything about it was really good, in my opinion, of course. And I'm kind of excited about this one. As of the time of recording this video, it hasn't been announced yet. But when the video goes live, obviously it will have been announced. And this is a somewhat mid-range smartphone. So in terms of specs, you're looking at a Snapdragon 720G for the chipset, and then 8 gigabytes of RAM and 256 gigabytes of internal storage. Though I believe there is also a model with a 128 gigabytes of storage. The packaging is very similar to the Find X2 Pro in terms of style, but I guess as a way to save money, this is actually just a sleeve that comes off, and then the box itself is pretty boring, just white. But still, it's the thought that counts, I guess. So we're gonna take that off and take a look at what's underneath. So this little thing has a case in there and some manuals, I'm assuming. And this is the phone itself. Take a look at it in a little bit. And under that we have the charger. So one of the big things that this phone does for a mid-ranger is that it supports OPPO's Super VOOC, I don't know how you're supposed to say that, charging. So this is 65 watts. It is very fast, and this is the same thing they have on the Find X2 Pro. So this charges your phone from 0 to 100% in about 36 minutes, and I can verify that. And it basically changes my charging habits completely. When I use these chargers, I just don't charge overnight anymore. Instead, I just, whenever I need to, if the battery is down, I just plug it in, and because it charges so quickly, it'll be back to where I need it to be before I need to go anywhere. So I don't leave it plugged in overnight just in case that would wear down the battery or something. So type C charging cable, of course, and those are some earbuds that use the 3.5 millimeter headphone jack that this phone does have. A rare sight, but it's here. So taking a look at the phone itself here, you can see some of the specs right away on the little sleeve. A 90 Hz refresh rate screen, a 65 watt charging, of course, some camera features, and the Snapdragon 720G. So for a mid-range phone, this has some interesting things going for it. Let's start with the back. So in terms of design, this is one of the more interesting things to me. We started seeing some phones with like matte glass recently, and this is one of the very few that I've used that's like that. But if you remember, I did a hands-on video and reviewed the TCL 10 Pro back in May, and that had a matte glass, but it was super smooth. Like it was almost more slippery than a glossy glass back. This feels a little more like what you'd expect frosted glass to feel like. It's a little rough almost, and it gives you a bit more grip for your fingers, so it doesn't seem as likely to slip from your hands or anything like that. And I really like that. I mean, I have mixed feelings about it, but having a better grip is always a good thing, I would say. And obviously it has this really cool design that you can see there with a gradient. They call this the Starry Night color. So it's black at the bottom, and then at the top it's this sort of silver, and it has this cool sheen to it in the light. It's really pretty. But they also have a white. It's still the white one is also frosted, but I don't think it has a gradient like this. It's just white. And of course we have the camera module there. 4 cameras. That's a 48 megapixel primary, an 8 megapixel ultra wide, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel monochrome camera. An unusual setup. I don't see a lot of monochrome cameras. I think this might actually be the first one that I see in the phone, personally. But In some ways, it's pretty standard because it has that 48 megapixel camera that a lot of phones have. The 8 megapixel ultra wide is also pretty standard, and the macro camera itself is also on a lot of phones. So that monochrome is really the most unique thing about it in terms of hardware. But anyways, going around the phone, this thing is super thin. I don't know for sure the thickness of every phone I've used recently, but this one is 7.7 millimeters, and it feels incredibly thin. Like this is definitely one of the thinnest phones I've used, and you feel that the edges feel almost a little sharp, but I don't think it's uncomfortable at all. From what I can feel right now, it's just it's thin. It's very unusual. But going around the phone, of course, you have the power button there with that green accent that Oppo loves to use, and I appreciate because it gives the phones a little bit more personality. I think that's kind of interesting. Then on top we have a microphone and a SIM card slot that I don't see a lot of at the top of the phone. On this side, just a volume rocker, and on the bottom, Type-C charging, a microphone, 3.5mm headphone jack, and a bottom firing speaker. So all pretty standard stuff. So now we're gonna turn it on. Obviously we have the display here. This is a 6.5-inch display in a 20:9 aspect ratio, full HD, so that's 2400 by 1080p if I'm not mistaken. And of course there's a little punch hole cutout for the camera there. What's really unique about this display, I would say, is the peak brightness. So it's 1100 nits, which for a mid-range smartphone is, I think, kind of crazy. I reviewed the Find X2 Pro earlier this year, like I said, and that is a phone that costs 1200 euro, and it had a 1200 nit peak brightness. So to have this mid-ranger be so close to that is pretty incredible. And then it's even more impressive because I believe the Find X2, the non-Pro version, only had 1000 nits of peak brightness, and that was still a way more expensive phone than this one. So I'm really intrigued that they went with such a high brightness display for this. It also has a 5:1 contrast ratio, a 92% screen to body ratio, so you see bezels are very minimal here. It looks like a really good display just looking at it. But we're gonna go ahead and set this up, and I'll be right back. Okay, so now that it's set up, we see the screen here. This thing looks beautiful. I just want to say the screen looks amazing. The colors are so vibrant and it's so bright. I don't know what brightness it is. That's less than half the brightness, so that looks amazing. I have to say, I really like the way that display looks. So this is running Android 10, but it's using ColorOS, Oppo's skin for Android. And this is version 7.2 of ColorOS, so it's a little newer than what I had on the Find X2 Pro. But there hasn't been a lot that's changed. This is a minor update, obviously, from 7.1 to 7.2. There isn't a ton that's new. So everything here is pretty familiar. See, the design is all very similar or the same exactly. The settings also look very much the same. You probably can't see it on video, but it does look very smooth with that 90 Hz refresh rate, which I believe it's on. I could be wrong about that, but I do think it's on. But in terms of software, it's very similar, but like I said, there are some new things. So this OPPO Lab app is new, and it's basically like experimental little features that OPPO is building in. It's not really a major new thing, but you have these two experiments that they have going on. I just keep getting notifications. I don't need that. But you have the decision spinner, which is basically just like a spinning wheel. You have like a bunch of options, and you tap to stop, and it gives you the result. And the Lab ringtone lets you sort of create a ringtone. It gives you a base theme, and then you can adjust like the tempo and stuff like that. So if it loads, I can try to show that off a little bit. So it has this bass theme, and then you can make it slower. You can change the pitch and have this and it just lets you adjust it like that, and then you can generate it. So it's one of the little things that they added here, nothing major, but I believe that's the biggest change. I know there's a couple more features like OPPO Share. If you remember, OPPO and a couple other Chinese manufacturers came up with this nearby sharing technology that works across some of those, OPPO, Vivo, and I think a couple others. There's something they call AI app preloading. So basically, they guess your habits, what you're gonna use, and they try to predict what apps you're gonna open, and they just load them before you open them. So that's the goal with that, at least. So that should help, and the goal of that is obviously to improve performance. They mentioned the battery feature that I haven't tested personally, but I don't see it here. I'm assuming it's just a super power saving mode, but they did mention that this can help you have the battery last longer over time, overnight. I mean, so if you leave it on, it'll only use like 2% battery overnight, according to them. But I don't think that's new, really. From ColorOS 7.1 to 7.2, there's not a lot that's new aside from that OPPO Lab thing. I'm not even sure that OPPO Share thing I mentioned is new either. But it's pretty much the same in terms of the software, some minor updates. But it doesn't need to change a lot because I actually quite like ColorOS already, so I'm okay with that. Yeah, so in terms of the software itself, that's it. But we can open the camera app here, see some of the features I was trying to mention. So some of the things here do look a little bit different than I remember, but it's generally the same as it was on the Find X2 Pro. So you have a night mode, of course. I don't know where everything is, but there's a lot of features that they mention here in the reviewer's guide. So yeah, so you see here in these settings, there's like color filters for portraits, and this night flare portrait is meant to be for night pictures. So there's a couple of features here. One thing about this color retention, it doesn't seem to be working all that well. Wasted my hand. I guess it just detects faces. But one thing about this is that even in video, you can use. How do you go back from here? Okay. In video, from what they say, you can use that color. Yeah, there you go. So you can make only a person have a color, or only certain colors be visible. So you still have those monochrome effects on video, which I think is interesting. I don't know if that a lot of phones do that. But yeah, so in terms of the camera hardware, it wasn't amazing, but it has a lot of these software features that might be interesting. But yeah, aside from that, the software is pretty much the same as it was before. Everything looks really smooth. The display looks really good, I have to say. And I'm very excited to review this. Hopefully, by the time this video goes live, the review should hopefully be live the next day. So tomorrow, hopefully, it'll be on Neon. And that's it for this video, I believe. I think I've covered most things about the phone, and I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys in the next one.